Into another edition of Skers Scoop. Today we're going to be talking about Nebraska basketball's what they did in the transfer portal. Obviously, it's been a couple weeks since the window to enter the transfer portal closed, but Nebraska in large part kind of has what their squad's going to look like for next year with them, and they're preparing to go into summer workouts here. So we're just going to talk through it, the additions, who they managed to retain, obviously who they lost. Can be a little bit of a talking point as well, but and then in the end we're going to offer our thoughts on how we think they did over probably the two most important weeks in the season, even though it's in the off season. So just going ahead and getting started, what I really want to point out to you guys, I guess we were already kind of talking about it a little bit, but I really think that the size Nebraska added is something that's going to kind of sticks out to me. Just when you look at the teams that they struggled with, like Purdue and Michigan, and Illinois, and even in the tournament with Iowa, the physicality and the length of those teams that did manage to beat them, you saw from the starting tip of those games that just Nebraska was going to kind of struggle to go against those opponents. So I think that that's an interesting talking point when you're adding a bunch of 6'11", 6'10", 6'9". Even Trevon Lenhart is 6'5", so like you're adding height, and I think that's a big thing. Just moving forward, that they're going to be a little bit more physical and able to rebound, which are those two things that really, Nebraska struggled with, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm, to build off of the height, I'm really intrigued to see how that is this year, just because I feel like every game we were going in, we're like, all right, a big key to victory here is getting rebounds. So, adding all that height is going to help you get rebounds. Obviously, you need guys with good technique and all that, but I'm excited to see what all this, new size can do. And you already have Frager and Sanford who are, decently sized. They're not like 6'10", but they're pretty big. And you have Caleb Jacobson. But yeah, I was really, happy, I think, with, who they brought in, for a while, when who's the guy from Boise State that didn't come, that we thought we were going to get.
Drew Fielder.
Yeah. At that point, when the news was that he wasn't probably going to come, and that was right before Trevon Lenhart committed, I was down like, dang, we just had that big season, and we're going to get jacked, out of this portal, and it's not going to look good. And then all of a sudden, bam, 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 we just got Lenhart, then Kapke, and then we added Caden Betts, Wilkinson too. We added a lot of good pieces, and I think with a guy like Caden Betts, I think that's more of like, he has some good potential, hasn't done a lot in college. He's had some injuries, but, I feel like he could definitely, thrive if he, gets in the right system, and, Fred Hoiberg can get the best out of him. I'm okay with taking that, especially knowing that we do have guys that will play good regardless, like Price Sanford, Braden Frager, Lenhart. So, if you get a guy with high upside and he, hits on the high upside, then you're just going to have another weapon out there too. So.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I mean, when you look at what we lost and what we gained, I think we easily, from that aspect, won the portal from how I view it, at least. I mean, we lost one really average player, I'd say, to the portal in BK, but I think we almost replaced him, and if not, got a better replacement in him, in Damon Wilkinson. I mean, averages 14 points a game, top 30 last year in field goal percentage, and I mean, he really has the one thing that BK couldn't do, which was score as effectively. And I really think we did a great job in the portal.
Yeah. So I think the kind of interesting aspect to that is going off the height and obviously knowing you're already going to need to replace Rink Mast either way. Even Jared Garcia, which he had a role on the team, even if, it wasn't big, he had a role. You need to replace him. And then obviously Burke. Combined with Sam Orm and Wilkinson, I think right there, like I do agree with you, Will. I think they probably upgraded and, hopefully spent less money than what Burke was asking for. So I think for the budget that Nebraska was on, even though that, ideally a lot, it was reported that it was going to be significantly more than what they were dealing with the year before. I still think they kind of had to be wary about where they were spending their money. And I think Fred Hoiberg in my opinion, I think he did a really good job at, building out the roster with what he was given. So I'm looking forward to that. another talking point that I would say is it seems like these guys are kind of all proven. A couple of them, and honestly, the majority of them are coming from kind of those mid-major, non kind of group of 5 programs. But they were either like all conference level players or just really solid in their roles. And I think that's something that really interests me because you already have Braden Frager and Price Hamper who combined for 30 points a game last year. That's going to be your offense. In my opinion, those two are going to be your offense. And from there, you're just trying to figure out how the rest of the team can score 40 points a night, combined. So I think they did a good job at adding shooters around them and veteran players that have a role. So if anybody, has anything, I guess, to add to that, go ahead or take it in a different direction.
That was exactly I was going to go to that point too, just because how we were being compared to Indiana football last year. Kurt Signini and his staff kind of went with guys that were, at the FCS level or, at the group of 5 level that were proven at that level, but they brought them up, and had hopes that they would pan out. And that's kind of what you were saying with, Nebraska did this past, with this transfer portal cycle, bringing in guys who, they're not like the 5-star that went to, some school and they didn't pan out. And so we're going to just get them and hopefully, they pan out for us. Or even just a super high level guy, like even a Drew Fielder, I feel like would have been like, but even he was at a lower level, I'm pretty sure. But
yep.
It's like, I really like just the strategy of how they went about this, getting guys that, can play basketball and they've done it at the D1 level in some capacity, and now you're going to put them in, guys that are going to fit the system. And I don't know, I just feel like it's going to be, we'll get to it when we get to the next section, but I'll say that for that, I guess. But
yeah,
Will, I got a question for you. So obviously, when you're looking at these kids from South Dakota State and Boise, well, I guess Drew Fielder was from Boise State, but Trevon Lenhart's coming from Utah State. Who else? Just a lot of these kids.
Boston College,
I think is coming from. Yeah, like it's not the Big Ten, right? And the Big Ten is viewed as, I would say, in my opinion, that the Big Ten was the best basketball conference. Best conference of college basketball last year, at least. Does it scare you that these kids aren't, don't have experience at the Big Ten, or do you not think that's that big of a deal, knowing their size and that they're bringing with them?
My answer to that would be, in short terms, no. It's a little worrying that, obviously any guy you get in the transfer portal, he's going to be either a swing or a miss. There's really no in between. But I think the reason that you go out and get guys from other leagues in the transfer portal is because you have those non-conference, those 11 to 12 non-conference games to start the year, so they can get accumulated with your system. And then once you start getting into Big Ten play, you either sink or swim. It's up to them. Obviously Fred knows what he's doing. I'm sure he believes in these guys that they can adjust to the Big Ten style of defense, especially. But I don't think they'll have problems scoring. I think defensively, it'll be hard. I'll say it won't be easy, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's maybe why the height, that they added is gonna help so much. Nate Lenzer, they were able to hold on to him.
Huge.
He kind of flirted with you and I there. Had an opportunity to become a head coach for sure, and Nebraska was able to retain him at least for one more year. And the rest of Nebraska staff was also signed. All of them signed multi-year contract extensions, which is big for continuity for a program that's kind of trying to cement itself within that top 25, top 15 of the sport. So I think that's going to help a ton. But, just knowing that, I guess we can go ahead and get into our next section here and talk about if we think it's going to work, I guess. So I kind of already gave my thoughts on where the scoring is going to come from. And I don't think from an offensive standpoint, you have Fred Hoiberg, who's one of probably the best coaches in college basketball at drawing up plays for guys. So I don't think you're ever really going to struggle to find offense with this team. A lot of the additions that they had, even even like a Kapke, I think, is like a 35% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
So like, their big guys can shoot. Everyone on this team that they recruited through the transfer portal can shoot. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch Nebraska. I think everyone's a threat, and I really think Fred Hoiberg tried to address making everyone on the offense, be that threat. So you can't see what happened to Price Sanford, at times during the regular season happen anymore. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Are you guys in agreement with that, I guess, or do you think it's going to be a struggle still?
I think it'll be a lot better. I mean, I'm excited to see the guys just come in, and we're just sticking to just the transfer portal guys. We're also adding in Colin Rice and Jacob Lanier, who are also, I think Colin Rice has a chance to factor in some capacity this next season. But I'm super excited to see these guys, especially in Fred Hoiberg's offensive system, and then Nate Lesner's what he's doing on the defensive end of the court as well.
Yeah. Will, are you thinking, obviously Nebraska finished second in the Big Ten last year, which no one obviously expected. They were picked 14th, but do you think they can kind of compete for like a top 3 spot in the Big Ten and knowing what their roster is going to look like? Are you assuming that this is a surefire NCAA tournament team next year?
I think that Nebraska I think that they will be a top 6 seed for sure next year in the Big Ten. I think they're definitely a tournament team, especially with the tournament expanding. Like, there's no doubt I think they'll make the tournament next year. There's just too much talent not to succeed in some capacity. But sure. I think it's definitely going to be harder next year to possibly get a top 4 seed, get that triple bye. I think it's definitely doable. I'd say if you had to give them a percentage chance, I'd say it's around 30 to 40% chance they do, just because the Big Ten is so dang competitive and talented overall. I mean, like, if you were to tell me that Minnesota or even like Northwestern were to turn around next year and be a top 3 seed, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the talent across the Big Ten is just it's too hard to predict, but I definitely think they're a tournament team next year.
Yeah, it's deep, it's big, and I think that's another important point why Nebraska was really aggressive. It seems like in getting a lot of big men. Hopefully that rotation that you kind of saw towards the end of the year that was kind of whittled down to like 7 people. If they can even get it to 9 or 10, I think that's going to be a huge relief off of Price Sanford, who's played a lot of basketball in his life. Braden Frager, dealt with sickness at time. A lot of the kids on the team dealt with sickness throughout the year that kind of punished Nebraska because they didn't have a big rotation that they could go to off the bench, who they trusted. And maybe they win some more games, maybe they don't. But I think next year, regardless, it's going to help them at least, stay competitive on a nightly basis and continue to do what they're doing. But if any of you guys have other thoughts, we definitely can add them. Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add.
Yeah, you can go, Elliot.
I'll go first. I'll just add to that point of just having a deep team, because you see games where, that first time we played Iowa and Iowa City when Price didn't have the greatest game. If you have more guys who can score, you don't always have to depend on one guy being that guy every single night to win the game. Because Price Sanford's going to have an off night, every other week or every other game, whatever it is. He's going to have an off game because, you can't consistently just score 20, 30 plus points every single game. But you need guys to be able to step up and score points and help you get that win and, fill the shoes that, that Price Sanford or Braden Frager, might have, scoring for us.
Yeah. I'm going to go in a completely different, just hypothetical question right here. Okay, so let's assume that Fred Hoiberg retires as Nebraska's already the best head coach of all time. If Nate Lenzer is still here, does he have that job in waiting or what?
That's a great question, but, in my opinion, he's been with Fred almost everywhere he's went. Lenzer's been at Nebraska the entire time. I think that, or at least for 5 years. I can't remember if it's the whole time that Hoiberg's been here. But regardless, he's familiar. He's obviously a huge reason. I think Fred Hoiberg would be the first person to point out why Nebraska had success last year was in large part due to Nate Lenzer, and his defense. So I wouldn't have a problem with it by any means. But, at the end of the day, it's still Nebraska. It's not like they're going to go out and get the hottest basketball coach that's available per se. But I mean, when you have a guy like Nate Lenzer, who's theoretically one of the best assistant coaches in college basketball, you should do everything in your, that you're capable of keeping him, I guess would be my take on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like if he is still around, when Fred Hoiberg does eventually retire, how soon that is or how late it is, I feel like you definitely could give him a really good look just to see, obviously you're gonna have to get somebody who's got a good offensive mind to be his assistant just because he's more of a defensive guy. But I mean, I think he's definitely earned it to this point. You've seen the last 3 years of how the defense has kind of just turned around and done a lot better. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And to Trevor's point, saying that, Nebraska is not going to go out and get, the hottest basketball coach in the country is definitely a good point. But yeah, good question, Will.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, is that your opinion, Will? Is that what you're asking that, I guess?
The reason I asked that is because I got a comment on my most recent basketball post, I think, and someone pointed out how we should immediately put the contract in detail that Nate Lenzer is the next head coach after Fred Hoiberg or something, and I was like,
sure.
I don't even hate that, and it was just I thought it was something fun to maybe bring up.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'd be interested to see. I can't imagine that those two are much different in age. So
yeah, that's the only thing I was thinking about.
I think the only thing that you'd be, thinking of with that would be, theoretically, if Hoiberg's health ever declined because of, his
yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. I mean, which obviously, hopefully, that would never happen, right? Because that'd just be it'd be bad for the program, and B, for Hoiberg himself, and nobody wants that to happen. But
I think
do you know
Fred's
their age?
Yeah, Fred's 10 years older than him, I think. So I mean,
oh, is he? Okay, really? Yeah, it's definitely possible then. And I mean, yeah, in my opinion, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. I mean, to what he's shown at this point, it's obviously a lot different running a program than just focusing on the defense of a team. But obviously he's been with Fred for a long time, and I'm sure those two have conversations about it regularly. So at some point he's going to be a head coach, and maybe it'll be at Nebraska.
I've definitely seen sometimes during a timeout, Lesnar will be leading the huddle because maybe it's more of a defensive thing too. But you've definitely seen him leading, the guys out there like a head coach at times too. So just another quality to that, just to I guess push forward the idea that Nate Lesnar could be the head coach, if Fred Hoiberg does retire.
Sure. Yeah. No, that is an interesting question. But unless you guys have anything else to add, we can wrap it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Good.
All right. Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. I would say the general consensus is that we're feeling pretty good about where Nebraska basketball is heading into next year. The pieces that they were able to retain are probably the biggest storyline out of them all. But just overall, they added shooting or scoring capability, height, and hopefully a little bit more depth. So all three of those things, I think, address some weaknesses that you saw from last year's team. And whether they end up going 20-0 again next season, which I think is highly unlikely, I think they're going to have a really solid team. So yeah, that'll do it for us in this one. Thank you for tuning in to Skers Scoop.